After 9/11, Saddam's regime posed a risk that the world could not afford to take.
Forces loyal to the rogue Shi'ite cleric Moqtada al-Sadr attacked a police station in Najaf. And when American troops moved in to help Iraqis defending the facility, fierce fighting broke out. Al-Sadr's men also fought U.S. forces in Baghdad.
Loyalists of radical Shiite cleric Moqtada al-Sadr battled Iraqi security and coalition forces in Najaf, taking down this U.S. helicopter.
That is footage from 2004, when the Mahdi army fought as a militant Shiite army in Iraq against both Iraqi forces and against U.S. troops. You remember that? The Mahdi army, right? The Mahdi army were loyal to one of the only men in Iraq who every American at the time learned the name of, Moqtada al-Sadr. When Saddam Hussein was executed, you might recall, when they hanged Saddam Hussein, the executioners in the room chanted Moqtada al-Sadr's name. When the U.S. Marines pulled down the Saddam statue in Baghdad, the Iraqis there chanted Moqtada al-Sadr's name. And then he went on to lead his Mahdi army against the U.S.
The Americans helped them pull it down. There was that very awkward moment where at one stage the Americans put an American flag on it.
That's right, I remember that.
And then they
over the face of the statue.
An American flag that had a tie to 9/11. It was a flag that had been in New York. What's odd, and the people who were in that square at the time, I was listening to them cheer. They weren't cheering the end of America, the end of Saddam, this is freedom, freedom. They were yelling, Aish, Aish, Aish Sadr. They were cheering for Sadr. They were cheering for, not Moqtada al-Sadr.
Sadr's father.
Exactly. So they were cheering for a
They're giving a Shiite sectarian chant.
As the statue's being pulled down. That's what they were yelling in the circuit.
See, that wouldn't have made local radio either.
I was reporting it at the time, but I said, look, this is just the beginning of something huge. They were not cheering, thank you, America, democracy. They were cheering for a Shiite cleric.
But in America, I mean, we were so, as Americans, we were so eager to have reflected back to us the supposed glory of the war as they chanted for Moqtada al-Sadr, his father. And the son has now inherited the legacy. But one last thing that I want to tell you about this week that happened in this week's news that did not happen in the U.S., but that is hugely important to the U.S. This has sort of gone down the memory hole, and it didn't get a lot of attention, but I think it's really important. One thing I got to tell you is that Moqtada al-Sadr is back now. He spent the last 3 years in Iran, and Iraq has just let him come back, which means that the man who led the religious Mahdi army against U.S. troops and against Iraqi forces is back. It means that the most famous man and maybe the most powerful man in Iraq now is a radical Shiite fundamentalist cleric. It means that the Iraq war, in the end, has had the effect of taking away Iran's biggest enemy right there on its border and making Iraq instead into Iran West, Iran adjacent, Iran's greatest ally in the world. You can send your Farsi thank you cards to George W. Bush.
I was fortunate to be an 8-year president. And 8 years is a long time.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure, a lot of opportunities, a lot of issues came to the desk, some of which I could anticipate, some of which I didn't anticipate. And
9/11, the biggest.
9/11 was the biggest.
You can send your Farsi thank you cards to George W. Bush.